The Darkangel by Meredith and Pierce, Chapter 3. The Duarough. "We will not hurt you," said one of the wraiths. "We cannot," said another. "Most of us are too weak to stand." "It is the weight of these garments," another said. Or perhaps it was the first again. They all moved about constantly, rocking or pacing before and behind her. Ariel could not keep her eye on them all, and all of them had the same face, save that some were more or less withered than others. "Our garments and our bones," another told her, "and the years and the tears. The other one wove our garments. She said we're of seed silk," said one of the wraiths. "But we are growing so thin that already they drag us down." They moved a little closer, and Ariel fell back until she pressed against the wall. A musty fragrance came from them, reminding her of ashes and root cellars. She watched the wraiths. "You must weave us kirtles of finer stuff, mouse hair, or bird song, or breath." They looked at her with their hollows for eyes, and some of them nodded. Ariel shrank away. Which one of you is the Odoan?" she whispered. Her voice would not stay steady otherwise. "Oh, we have all lost our names by this time," they replied. "Which one of you was the first to come here?" The wraiths looked at one another in puzzlement. "We do not know," one said. "Our memories fade, then come again. None of us can now remember back much farther than a day-month, and there were always many of us a day-month ago." Ariel suppressed a shudder. "Why does he keep you here?" "We keep ourselves," said the wraiths. "If we wandered freely about this great castle, we would surely lose ourselves, what little there is left of ourselves to lose." Ariel grimaced at the creature's closeness. "Why are you afraid of us?" said another of the wraiths. "What has he done to you?" cried Ariel softly, able to keep her repulsion hidden no longer. "You were women once." "True," said one. "We were like you, but prettier." "What has he done to you?" cried Ariel again. "Drunk up our blood, stolen our souls, torn out our hearts, and thrown them to the gargoyles." Ariel turned away from them, groped for the door. "Where are you going?" cried the wraiths. "I," began Ariel, finding the doorway with her hand. "Do not leave us." I must find the garden." "We have no one to talk to," said one of the wraiths. "You have each other," stammered Ariel, brushing away one slender mummy hand that reached to catch a pleat of her kirtle and tug her back. "We are all almost the same," sighed the wraiths. "Talking to each other is only a little more or less like talking to oneself." I must go," choked Ariel, gathering her kirtle more closely about her against the delicate pulls and pinches of their hesitant, outreaching hands. "Go," they told her, "but come back." "I will come back," she heard herself promising anything to be gone, and ran. The garden lay on the north face of the castle above the cliffside, and had grown quite wild in the years since it had been tended. Silvery spindlegrass threaded up through the pavement. Across the footpaths snaked sinewy creepers, their long twining tendrils dotted by wine-scented blossoms with petals of gold. Elsewhere in the garden the fire thorn was in flower, and beside it the brittle fruit stood blooming, its branches unladen as yet with sweet crystalline drupes. Ariel wandered amid the flowers and the foliage, pausing now and again to peer through the fronds of white fig or sort through the leaves of owl's feather, worth in search of fruit or seed or nut. But there were none, and slowly she began to wonder whether this might not be a garden arrested in mid-season, where everything flowered but nothing came to fruit, nor perhaps would wither and die. Ariel was hungry. Solstar had climbed a dozen degrees in the black starry heavens since she had last eaten, and more than that since she had last tasted water. The nectarine scent of the flowers made her stomach twist with hunger. Her throat was close and dry. She had begun to feel lightheaded, dizzy. She spotted a statue in the sunlight only a few paces from her, a little man about 3 feet high. He had a quizzical face, with a long, twining beard. Ariel approached the stone figure, leaned against it for support, but he was not a statue, she discovered. Only a moment after her shadow fell across him, he slowly blinked, then pursed his lips and stretched. "Well, merciful darkness, girl," he sighed. "I thought you'd never. Don't move," he cried as Ariel leapt back in surprise. As he said it, he jumped with her so that he remained in her shadow. "Now keep your wits, girl," he continued quickly. "I couldn't hurt you if I wanted, and I can only be of help if you'll have me." "Who are you?" said Ariel hesitantly, more intrigued than frightened. "You may call me Talb," the little man said with a bow, still careful to remain in her shadow. "It is not my name, but then one must be careful just whom one hands one's name out to these days, and who, may I inquire, are you?" "My name is Ariel," she replied. "I came from the foot of the steeps of Terrain." "That far?" said the little man. "Well, he must have brought you, then. Not one of his new brides, I hope. But no, you're not wasted enough. It's too soon, besides. May we stand out of the sun, mistress?" Here the little man's tone grew petulant. "It's rather awkward trying to stand here in your shadow when you keep bending and cocking your head to peer at me. Perhaps the songbriar over there?" He gestured, and Ariel nodded. They walked carefully to the shade of the leafy songbriar and sat down on the grassy lime rock. "You're his new maid, I suppose," said the little man, straightening the sleeves of his robe. The air about him smelled like old parchment and calf. "I'm to spin," said Ariel, "for his wives." "Oh," said the other with some distaste. "Those awful wraiths. They wail, did you know, worse than gargoyles. I've tried talking to them once or twice, witness things. I think their brain pads must be empty." Ariel looked at him. "I find them pitiable," she said, trying hard to put down her repulsion. She had promised to go back. "Grotesque, perhaps, but it's not their fault." "Oh, without a doubt, said the little man agreed. "But not much company." Ariel looked off across the garden. What are you?" she asked. "And from where do you come?" The little man's tangled eyebrows rose. "I'm a Duarough," he cried, almost indignant. "Can't you tell? I come from the ground. From the caves under the ground. From the great caves, from the jeweled caverns. I was treasurer to the late king in my time. Kept the vast storehouses brimming with jewels, all empty now. There is only the lime crystal left in the caves. Though that is lovely." His voice trailed off, and his little stone-gray eyes grew moist, remembering. "What were you doing in the garden?" Ariel asked him in a moment when he did not continue. "That is, why were you standing so still?" Excuse me. She was afraid to admit she had taken him for a statue. Said her companion, coming out of his thoughts. "Oh, yes, well, I'm a Duarough, as I said. Are you sure you have not heard of us? We do well enough by dark, or starlight, or earthlight, or even lamplight, but the light of the soul star blinds us, halts us in mid-step, turns us to stone, you might say. We can't look away." He chuckled softly, stretched again, and yawned. "I had just come out in the pre-dawn for a bit of fresh air, but I'm afraid I dozed, and the sunrise caught me. Mary, I was glad when you stumbled upon me. I was afraid I should have to stand there all day month till sunset, staring into that wretched star." Ariel felt her hunger returning as her initial surprise faded. "You said you could help me?" she said in a moment. "Ah, yes, and so I can," said the Duarough. "So I can. I tried to help the one before you, but she wouldn't listen. At first she was of good heart and as gay as could be expected, but the day-months grew long, and she began to look weary as the wraiths, hollow-cheeked and hollow-eyed." The little man sighed and shook his head. She knew she mustn't run away, but she kept straying to the steps of the cliff face that lead down to the plain. One day she took them, poor thing, didn't get very far. The gargoyles saw her escaping almost at once, and raised the alarm. Dreadful sound. The Duarough looked at Ariel. "I suppose that is why he brought you here, to replace her." "Please," said Ariel. She was feeling faint. "Is there any food in this garden?" "Ah, food!" her companion cried, as if suddenly remembering himself. "Of course. No, there's no food in this place, but if you'll follow, I'll take you to my caves, where there's food and in plenty." And we will pause there.